Quincy's Dance by Paul Siegel. Ah, hello, friend. Ah, I see you have come to me with a heavy heart. A damsel, you say? Oh, fear not. I have a story that will set your worries aside. You may actually have much to be grateful for today, you know. I can see now that it is no coincidence you have stumbled on my path this evening. I'll sit here and enjoy some of my own heart-healing elixir while I tell you my tale. This story begins with a solitary ranger, a young man named Joshua, venturing into a bustling town, much like this one. His footsteps led him into the notorious Horse Hoof Hub and Brewery, a pub cloaked in legends and whispered jests. Those of discerning mind steered clear of the so-called H squared, their humor lost among common folk. The tale takes place in an era of mythical creatures, dragons, and tribal quarrels. Even men walked in fear when venturing alone into the woods. This particular night was deep and cold, and the motley crowd of ruffians congregated around the pub, their crude laughter carried by the icy wind. Inside, the air reeked of sour ale and bawdy men. Amidst the grimy patrons, Joshua, an impeccable, clean lad of youthful vigor, much like yourself, actually, felt sorely out of place. However, this very predicament was his desired crucible. He sought to temper his character in the fiery forge of common life, so to speak. But as his gaze swept the room, it was arrested by a vision of ethereal beauty, a damsel sitting in a dimly lit corner. Her skin glowed like moonlight, her hair a cascade of silk and snow. She seemed too otherworldly for the rowdy pub. Struck by her celestial aura, Joshua made his inquiry at the bar. "Excuse me, pray tell, who is yonder maiden?" The barkeep merely shrugged. Walked in just before ye, she did." Compelled by a potent mix of concern and curiosity, our young ranger strode across the room to the maiden. As he approached, he noticed her distress and tears flowing down her arms. "Pardon my intrusion, fair lady. Are you accompanied tonight?" Her eyes glistened with tears, met his as she shook her head. "What is wrong, my lady? May I sit?" She nodded and began to speak. "My husband was just killed by a pale troll. I ran from those woods as fast as I could. I knew nowhere else to go." Her tale was a tragic one. Her husband was ripped asunder, limb by limb, right before her eyes. Joshua's heart was heavy with her plight. He held her hand. "Allow me to offer you shelter. My home is just beyond Merrill's River. You'll be safe with me. May I ask your name?" Shrugging her shoulders in pitiful shame, as she stood up and whimpered, "Quincy." "My name is Joshua. Please come with me. This is no place for a lady as fair as thee. I shall find you food and shelter that is proper for a woman of your grace." As he was about to escort the distressed damsel out of the pub, a burly lout attempted to claim her for himself. Yet Joshua was no stranger to conflict. Despite his tender years, his training since childhood had instilled in him the courage and, untested, skill of a knight. With a swift movement, he unsheathed his sword and stood between the thug and Quincy. "Stand back." Holding her hand, they retreated slowly, walking backwards until exiting the pub. Outside, a carriage awaited them, which was no common sight. Only, wealthy types afforded such things, not to mention the well-clad coachman sitting at the head. The carriage ride through the dark woods was fraught with anxiety. Quincy was haunted by the recollection of the troll's ambush, but yet couldn't help stand right beside the window, looking out inquisitively, perhaps even longingly. The path led deeper into the woods than she had ever ventured before when she asked, "What lies in these woods?" "Nothing befitting of a lady like yourself, my lady. It is no safe place to go alone." Joshua assured her she would be safe as long as she stayed with him. They arrived at Joshua's estate, a near castle-like structure that emanated an aura of security. Quincy's fears began to dissipate, replaced by an overwhelming feeling of safety. So powerful was this sense of security that she found herself drawn toward her savior, her heart fluttering with affection. Joshua, unable to resist her charm, reciprocated her feelings. That night, under the silent witness of the star-studded sky, their passions intertwined, sparking a flame that would set the course of their lives. The following day was a new dawn for both Joshua and Quincy. Their love blossomed in the wake of tragedy, marked the start of a shared existence. However, the joy of their union was short-lived, for that night, Quincy was inexplicably drawn to the darkness once again. As Joshua slumbered, Quincy found herself tiptoeing her way to the entrance. She unlatched the door bar. Her actions echoed into the vaulted ceilings, rousing Joshua from his sleep. Following the sound, he found the front door ajar and Quincy missing. His heart was filled with dread. Arming himself, Joshua plunged into the ominous woods where he found her, dancing in the moonlight. Her ethereal movements combined with her flowing white gown gave her the appearance of a spectral apparition. Joshua, with his sword still drawn and heart racing, urged her to come back. "Please, my lady, it is not safe out here at night in these woods." Suddenly, the rustling of leaves caught Joshua's attention. He saw a massive boar, a creature far larger and more lethal than the ones of our world. It charged toward Quincy. Joshua bravely intercepted the beast, his sword finding purchase in the boar's thick neck. Though victorious, the confrontation left him badly injured, forcing them to retreat to their home where Joshua's faithful manservant tended to his wounds. She curled into her knees and wept. "What is wrong with me?" she cried. Her tears of despair drew Joshua to his feet as he limped toward her. My dear, there's nothing wrong with you. Just get some rest. Cedric, I can tend to my own wound. Why don't you escort my lady to hers and attend to her needs?" "Yes, sir," he gently answered. Over the next few days, their lives took a dramatic turn. In broad daylight, on a carriage ride into town, Quincy noticed a cliff wall, silver in appearance, with a crack large enough to climb into. Her insatiable curiosity urged the coachman to stop. She leaped out before Joshua was able to stop her. He rushed after her as she led him toward the dark cavern. She began climbing into the opening, but was still beyond his reach, so he called out and urged, "Quincy, please, don't go in there." She looked over her shoulder with a childish smile. "Come on, let's just take a peek." Despite Joshua's pleas, she ventured into the mouth of danger. He rushed toward her and heard a scream. As he rushed in, awaiting was a sickly pale troll, much like the one Quincy had described that night they met. The troll, seeing Quincy, gleefully trapped her. "I thinks I gonna eat her for dessert." He slapped his tongue against his teeth and lips and turned his gaze to Joshua. Weaponless, tried to save her, the fool. But one fell swoop of the troll's arm sent Joshua flying against a rock and fractured his skull. The death was instant. The news of the encounter spread through their manservant Cedric, who, unable to combat the troll, fled to the town to seek help. Back at Horsehoof, the tale of Quincy's plight spread like wildfire. Many brave men attempted to save her, only to meet their end at the hands of the troll. The troll, delighting in the stream of victims and food, chose to let Quincy live, a bait for his trap. He kept her safe and sufficiently fed. Amidst the tumultuous theater of life, Quincy stood as a silent witness to the ceaseless symphony of slaughter, a tragic aria that played relentlessly in her heart and soul. Each heart-rending chord of violence struck a dissonant note within her being, echoing through the chambers of her existence with a mournful cadence. The weight of this sorrow, like an anchor, dragged her spirit to unfathomable depths, where grief and shame intertwined and danced in a somber waltz. The profound depth of her emotions threatened to engulf her entirely, leaving behind a void so vast that even the most tender tendrils of empathy struggled to find footing. Once her heart had been a sanctuary of compassion, a wellspring of understanding that flowed freely to touch the lives of others. Yet now, it seemed as though that well had run dry, leaving her bereft of the very essence that once defined her. The emptiness that now filled her gaze mirrored the vast emptiness within, a poignant testament to the loss she felt on behalf of those who had suffered. In the wake of so much carnage, Quincy found herself adrift in a sea of sorrow, the waves of agony crashing relentlessly upon her fragile shore. The once vibrant hues of her emotions had faded, leaving behind a muted palette of despair. Her soul, like a tattered canvas, bore the indelible marks of tragedy, each brushstroke of pain a haunting reminder of the lives lost in her name. As she looked upon the world with weary eyes, it seemed as though the very essence of humanity had been tainted by a relentless cruelty that knew no bounds. The tendrils of empathy, once so readily extended, had become elusive wisps slipping through her grasp, like ethereal specters. Eventually, the news of her capture reached a far-off nobleman, a man of keen intellect rather than brute strength. Determined to save Quincy, he hatched a plan. The nobleman hired mercenaries to draw the troll out of the cavern. Meanwhile, he sneaked in, freed Quincy, and fled the site. She showed no emotion, however, and her body was limp from being tied for so long. The hour was late, and in their carriage on the way to his estate, she looked out into the dark woods. A glimmer and smile suddenly befell her, and with lifted spirits longingly asked, "I wonder, what is out there?" He held her tight and said, "You need not concern yourself with such matters. You will be safe with me."